And you should get something that looks like this. Is that, yeah, that has everything in there. Does everybody have it open? Do I need to wait for anybody? Yeah, okay, all right. So let's go ahead and let me talk a little bit about the interface right here, which is there are a couple sets of toolboxes that you see right here. Oh, sorry, first thing, everybody go up to Window, go to Workspace, and then click on Essentials. And what this is, workspaces are different ways to organize your tools. And so by everybody going to Essentials, that means that we'll have the tools laid out in the same area on the screen so that you guys can follow along. And I'm working in Illustrator Creative Cloud. If you're working in a different version of Illustrator, the setup might be a little bit different, but you should be able to follow along without a problem. So the setup here, we have toolbars on either side, which have tools to manipulate objects. And then up at the top, because we don't have a document open right now, it's not up here, but this section right here is called the control bar. So let's go ahead and open up, or create a new document. So if you go to File, New, you'll see you get a dialog box, and this is where you can name your document, you can set the size of the document, you can tell Illustrator whether you want to work in print resolution or web resolution. Does that make sense to everybody, or should I explain the difference between print and web resolution? I'm getting yeses. Okay, so I'm trying to think how to do this. Okay, so basically when you create images for the web can only display them at a certain resolution, which is basically a number of pixels by a number of pixels. And so web graphics tend to be lower resolution than print graphics. And the standard is 72 dots per inch. So essentially if you have a 1 inch by 1 inch square, there's 72 dots across and 72 dots down, right? And that, when it's projected on a screen and your eye's looking at it, looks pretty crisp to us. Okay, but now whenever you print something on a piece of paper, there's something about the way your eye sees the piece of paper that if you print something that's 72 by 72, it looks really blurry. So the standard for print, whenever you're setting a resolution of a document, is to do 300 by 300. So basically you smush in a lot more pixels into a smaller amount of space, which gives you a lot more detail. So for print documents, generally higher resolution, higher detail. For web documents, lower resolution, lower detail. So when I set up documents, I generally set them up for print because that always gives me the flexibility to save down to a web resolution versus if you start something at 72 dots per inch and then all of a sudden have to print it, you're kind of SOL because it's really hard to add pixels to something versus take them away, essentially. It's a little bit different with vectors because your computer's doing all that math and everything, but anyway, I just generally like to set things up for print.
So if you were making a figure for paper, you would always use print?
Yes, always use print, yeah. And so how you would do that, here you can actually set the size of your document. I generally set it to a letter size paper, so here you have some different options. I usually set it to a letter size and then work within that just so that I know about how big the figure is going to be on the paper that I'm working on, right? Like if you know you have half a page for the figure size or a quarter of a page, etc. And so then here you can set the inches if you need to change that. If you look over at orientation, you can go portrait, which is taller than it is wide, or you can go landscape, which is wider than it is tall. So I'm just going to go ahead and set it for, and you can see these numbers were switching, 8.5 by 11 on the width and the height. So I'm going to go ahead and set it for portrait. We don't really need to worry about bleed because I'm assuming that we're all working on images that are going to be printed within the margins of a page size. So, and then down here in this advanced box, I don't know if yours defaulted to having it open, but in the advanced section of this this dialog box is where you can set a color mode. And for color mode, printers usually use 4 colors of ink to print things out, and that's called CMYK. It's cyan, yellow, magenta, and black, which for some reason is a K in this. I guess CMYB sounded weird. So CMYK is for print. And if you click on this, you can also see RGB. So RGB would be for like a web document because your color or your monitor renders color using red, green, and blue light versus ink is the 4 colors of ink come together to make color. So for print, again, set it for CMYK, and then your raster effects is essentially your resolution. And here you can see high, medium, or screen resolution. Yeah?
I just had a question about color mode.
Yeah.
Just something I ran into the other day. I took a vector from PowerPoint that was a bright color, and when it came into the print, it was downgraded to a much duller color.
Yeah.
So do you always have to change, like if you want to preserve that, do you always have to change the color mode? Like why is it just because it's easier to print the duller color?
Yeah, so it's basically the difference. You're more limited in the colors that you can create to print on a piece of paper than you are the colors that you can create on a screen. So the way colors rendered on a screen, you have like bajillions of possibilities of colors. I can't even remember what the number is, just by combining the red, green, and blue. But when you go to print on a paper, those 4 ink colors can only create a specific number of variations. And so what it does is it does an automatic transfer. And you are absolutely right, it tends to be duller. There are some options. I don't know if I should get into it, but basically, like when you're printing, you can do specialty print stuff where you use another ink color, and they can create like neon inks or super brightly colored inks outside of the 4-color process, but that gets really expensive. So
if you were doing something that was primarily for like web or animation or whatever, you could just change it to RGB.
Yeah.
Because of the brightness.
Yep. Exactly. And so let's go ahead and click OK here. And let's assume that you had just opened something up and you wanted it to be for web. Then you can go to File, Document Color Mode. And in here, you can switch that back and forth. You can go between the RGB and the CMYK. So.